Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first welcome to the first 10 to watch of the 2023 season. My name is Jonathan Fadugba. I'm joined by Steve Wyss, and this is a massively special part of the show. Traditional, a bit like Christmas or, I don't know, Easter. We always have, every year on our season previews, a 10 to watch for each league, Sweden and Norway. This is the exclusive Eliteserien 10 to watch for 2023, brought to you by Steve Wyss. Steve, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Jonathan. Normally this would be 2 or 3 weeks earlier than it is, but just like my cricket season, it's been delayed. Mostly due to we weren't exactly sure how we were going to bring this across graphic-wise, and also in terms of a few other aspects. But it's here now, better late than never. And I thought we'd better get it done simply before May comes around, so we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, we decided this year to have it a little bit into the season. I think there's actually a few benefits to this. Potentially getting players who maybe aren't playing in squads. Looking through some of my older Allsvenskan ones, there's players that maybe don't even feature for a long part of the season. So I think this might be a little bit more on the money in terms of who's going to be starting games with 2 or 3 rounds played already. And it also gives us a chance to review these players and have a little final watch of them. So I believe this will actually benefit the show for you and the product. You must be watching on Patreon if you're watching this within the next year anyway. So thank you so much for joining us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Really appreciate your support. This is exclusive to subscribers for the first, certainly the first few months. So if you're watching this and you've contributed to the show, we really appreciate it. And obviously money that is received, we put back into the show and try and give you as good content as possible. So Steve's got the 10 ready to go. He's been studiously looking at these players and has been working hard. We're going to reveal the first name now, and then we're going to go through each of our 10, and Steve's going to give a little overview. So take it away, Steve. Number 1 on your list. Let's get into it.
Yeah, the first player on my list is a player at Uba Charles. So already people are thinking, well, this could be anyone, right? I'm going with a Slovenian player called Nino Zugelj. I'm not actually 100% sure of his pronunciation. You might do it better than me. But this is a player that hasn't been seen yet this season, apart from in the Norwegian Cup. He's injured until mid-May. So at the moment, he's not really on anyone's radar. But he was signed for £1 million last year from Maribor, Slovenian team. And he's made fleeting appearances for Uba Charles. His most minutes for the club have actually come in the Champions League qualifiers, would you believe? But he made a very interesting appearance in the Norwegian Cup off the bench to start this season against Viking. Scored 2 goals in 24 minutes, and that massively helped them progress. Now, as you know, with Uba Charles, they've nailed recruitment in the last few years, and I think this guy is no different. He's going to operate probably on either wing, mostly I think on the right wing. And he may well be the replacement for Joel Mvuka when he completes his transfer to Lorient in the summer. So it's just like Uba Charles' system recently. It's almost next man on the conveyor belt when someone's sold on or leaves. But at the moment, as I say, no one's really talking about him too much because they're kind of forgetting his talents. And this injury that's put him out until probably mid to late May. But I reckon come the middle of the summer, come the end of the summer, he could be all the rage at Uba Charles.
Nino Zugelj or Zugelj, I believe, not sure. But yeah, there you go, 23-year-old winger at Uba Charles. Stevie's previous clubs in his career, NK Maribor, Drava, Pratuj, and NK Bravo, I believe. Signed for, is it €1 million?
Something like that, yeah.
What kind of, why he's a wide player, like you said. These days, we talked about it just before we came on air, a forward or a winger can be very versatile in the modern game. What are his kind of attributes in terms of how does he use himself as a winger? Is he kind of running behind, get crosses in? Is he more of a cut inside, technical, inside forward type? Just tell us a little bit about his game from a technical point of view.
Well, it's interesting. There's quite a lot of players on this list this year who play in wide areas. Maybe that a sign of where football's becoming. But as we know, a lot of these players who do play in technically wide positions often cut inside, and he's no different at all. He will be an inside type of forward. He's quite a big lad. He's 1.89 meters tall, and really you could describe him as a wide target man as well. So he's got a physical strength. similar to what Ola Solbakken was actually for Bodø Glimt, who moved to Roma, of course. So some might consider him a replacement for him. Of course, he came last season, and I think Glimt maybe were hoping by now that he would be the sort of player that could be used on that position as a regular starter. That's probably not going to happen now until, like I said, June, July time when Mvuka moves on. But yeah, physically strong, wide target man who will cut inside. And I've seen him score some good goals so far in his short career with Bodø Glimt. On his left foot there. So that cut match really stood out to me as someone. When I saw him, it was only for 25 minutes. But I'm like, yeah, this guy, yeah, watch out for him this season. And it's a real shame that he picked up the injury in that game.
Yeah, and he's 6'2" as well, apparently. So according to Wikipedia, so I guess he's, like you say, there's a good frame about him. What do you expect his projection is? You mentioned he's kind of going to integrate himself into the team. He's got 1 goal in 1 game in the Europa League in this current season, according to Transfermarkt. Do you expect him to kind of maybe be someone who, like you said, has to wait for his chance, wait for maybe a couple of players to leave before he comes in? And if we're projecting this, let's say, in a year's time, do you think he's someone that would get another move, or do you think he's someone that would just eventually get into the Glimt team? What are his challenges for the next year ahead?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, he needs to get himself as a regular starter. That will, come the start of July, it will massively help him when Mvuka's moved on. Like I said, nail down that right wing position, cutting inside. He's 23 years old, so he is probably approaching his peak. And he may well be one of these players, a bit like Solbakken, give him a couple of years at the club. They could potentially sell him for an even bigger fee. But the worst case scenario would be that he's just a solid, decent Eliteserien level player who will contribute. So it just looks to me like a really good pickup for €1 million. And I think come in the second half of the season, this guy might absolutely fly. It is a little bit of a concern that I think he's had quite a few niggling injuries in his short time at the club so far. So he does need to watch that a little bit, doesn't he? But interesting player, Jonathan, that's for sure. And one to certainly keep an eye on. There's several players I could have maybe chosen from Bodø Glimt, but I feel like this was a good selection for this year's 10 to watch, because I don't think at the minute he is on anyone's radar particularly. But I think he will certainly be there come second half of this campaign.
Lovely stuff. Let's move on to your next pick, Steve. Number 2 on the list. Nino Zugelj, keep an eye on him, winger for Bodø Glimt, obviously a club that is very good working with talent and developing it. Next on the list, we have Kristall Manni Ingason.
Yeah, this is a bit more of an obvious one, really. Signed last summer for Rosenborg. Icelandic wonderkid, I suppose, is the best way we can describe him. He already actually has 4 Icelandic caps at the age of 21, full senior caps. It's one of those where I think this quite rightly may well be his breakthrough year. He signed for the club last summer, back end of the transfer window, made eight appearances, 2 goals, 1 assist, but he had a bad shoulder injury which took him out for about 6 weeks. So he didn't really have the chance to fully shine in that particular period of games for Rosenborg. I think everyone's kind of expecting him to step up this year and really make a mark on Eliteserien. I've got to be honest, so far from what I've seen of him, it's not been amazing. It's only been 3 games, but he's basically started 1 game, came off early, didn't even come off the bench against Molde, and only 45 minutes against Sandefjord. So far he's not really hit the ground running as we might have expected him at the start of this season, but I think he'll grow. One big positive for Ingason is he can play pretty much anywhere on the field. Like literally, you name me a position apart from say centre back or goalkeeper, he's played it genuinely, and he's only 21 years of age. And I know probably in Iceland you could, if you're that good, you can play anywhere, can't you? In fairness, but he's like a Swiss Army knife already. He doesn't have to just play up front. He can play left wing, right wing, shadow striker role, A mid. And he's even been known to sort of play on the wing-back positions as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to like about Kristall Manni Ingason. And there was quite a lot of hype about him heading into this season that he could almost be like a 10-step replacement for Rosenborg. So it's an obvious one. Everyone's definitely keeping an eye on Ingason. But this is, that's why we put him on these shows, because he is one to watch.
Yeah, and he's got a nice shock of sort of dyed blonde hair. I think he looks a bit like Eminem in his prime, maybe at the moment. Definitely stands out on the pitch. What would you say? You said he's so positionally versatile. I mean, looking at his sort of track record, he's an Icelandic under-21 international. He's played a decent body of games, hasn't he? In January, he's played in Champions League qualifiers, 3 games, 3 goals, in fact, which isn't too bad. And I think in his career in the best Adad League, he's played 45 games, 8 goals, 11 assists, according to Transfermarkt. What is his actual best position, though, in your mind? You said he's a Swiss Army knife there. What would you say is his current best position, and how do you think he will develop, because he's still young?
You're right, by the way, about his appearance. There's a bit of an Eminem sort of look about him there. But I don't know what his best position is. I'm not sure he would know. I don't know. I think he's got good acceleration on him, though. So I think he's better suited running from a little bit deeper at times, sort of from maybe that whole position. Shadow striker is a role often known for that nowadays, isn't it? Just he's not a number 9 for me at this point in time. He could play 9, obviously, but I think just a little bit deeper from a number 9, but at the same time, he's not a 10 either. So that's where I'd say maybe it's his best position. But he's got to say great acceleration. He looks like he's got good balance, agility. And I think that'll develop even better in time. He's got that burst about him in a lot of different ways, which can cause all sorts of issues to defenders. Those, I would say, probably is his biggest strengths. He looks a little bit lightweight physically, and maybe that's something he just needs to bulk up a little bit. Perhaps that caused the injury last year. It's quite a physical league, is Eliteserien, but looks skillful enough. And, he's one of these big hopes of talent for Iceland going forward. There's a few of them knocking around Europe at the minute, and we might well see like a golden generation of Iceland again in, say, 5-6 years time.
Golden generation, yeah, good. You heard it here first. I mean, that could be a big prediction. He's also played for FC Copenhagen, hasn't he? Played for their under-19 team before he moved to Viking or Reykjavik. So he's been around the block in kind of Scandinavia, and he's been in Denmark, been in Iceland. Now he's in Norway. So let's see how he gets on. Steve, is he someone that you think could become a key man for Rosenborg, or do you think, projecting the year ahead, give us a prediction? Is he going to be someone they're going to make multiple millions on him? What's your sort of year ahead projection?
Yeah, I think his big development needs to be a bit, probably mentally a bit. Like I said, I've been disappointed with him so far this season, but heading into the campaign, there's a lot of hype. He might need maybe a couple of years, to develop in Eliteserien. I'm not sure it's going to be a quick, like Kasper Tengstedt thing, where a quick 6 months here and you're off. I don't think it's going to be a quick 12 months and you're off. I think he might just need at least 18 months, 2 years to really make his mark at the club before maybe moving on eventually again. And he does need to look at his physicality a little bit. There might be some leagues that he wouldn't be able to play because of that, unless he beefed up a little bit. But that can time. He's still only 21. He only turned 21 in January as well, so he's got a younger 21. There's no doubt there's got a massive ceiling if things go well for him. But the path isn't necessarily as clear as you think. You mentioned Eminem there. I've got to put a pun in here, haven't I, of some sort? We've got to be careful not to lose ourselves in the moment sometimes.
Very good, very good. I was worried where you're going to go with that with Eminem. Sleep. If you listen to his lyrics these days, it's like there's not many ones you get away with in this day and age, I think. But yeah, Kristall, Manny, Ingason, they're keeping an eye out for him. Sounds like someone who might be around for a little bit, not maybe going to burst onto the scene. I mean, in terms of Eliteserien minutes, he is only currently played 354 minutes in his Eliteserien career, 10 appearances, 2 goals, 1 assist. So very, very early days, isn't it, in Eliteserien from in terms of game time? And we will keep an eye on him with eagerness. I mean, in terms of this show in general, just to give a bit of background, it's obviously very popular with scouts. It's become our flagship show, really. A lot of professional clubs actually subscribe to this Patreon just to get their 10 to watch from last year when it was on Patreon. And in the past, of course, on the podcast, it's been very popular. Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. You can contact both of us. We both have analyst backgrounds and scouting backgrounds from that point of view. So, or my own background in scouting. So I think that generally speaking, we tend to get a lot of these right. And so hopefully these players are ones that you will keep an eye on in the years to come. And Manny Ingason sounds like one definitely to watch. And even if he's not amazing, he's definitely got a nice haircut. So let's move on to your third pick there, Steve. We're moving to Viking now. And it's the youngest player on your list. Let's let you introduce him.
Edvin Austbo, Viking winger or attacker, however you want to say it, 17-year-old at this point of recording. And you're right what you say, by the way, about this almost being our flagship show, where there's been a lot of interest down the years from various different people in football. And, most of the names that I put on this list, I'm sure several are already following them. But it's almost like we give it the stamp of approval, if you know what I mean, Jonathan. Because you're right, we do have a lot of hits from this list. And I think if your name does come on this list, it's worth further consideration, delving deeper for anyone who is interested.
Yeah, I mean, briefly on that, just before you get into Edvin Austbo, nice name. What would you say is your best? You mentioned it there and you touched on it, and it's right. And we'll just have a little interlude. We've been doing the 10 to watch now for about 4 or 5 years minimum. What would you say maybe one or two of your highlights, if you know what I mean, in terms of players that you've identified so far? Because like you said, I can think of clubs from different countries, from Scotland to, Denmark to Belgium, who engage with this podcast and kind of do enjoy our 10 to watches. So we have, like you say, have a decent track record. Maybe could you just name one or two of your favourites over the years that you've had so far? I can think of one in particular that you might name.
Well, yeah, there's been some really good ones. I mean, just looking back, Patrick Berg, I think it was about 3 years ago. Hugo Vetlesen, I had him at Stabæk when he was 19. I'm trying to think of Christopher Claassen. Don't even know what he's doing at Leeds now. We could maybe do with him in goal, but obviously David Datro Fofana broke rules with this show, didn't he? By being back on 2 years in a row. Massive move out of Norway. So yeah, there's some high. Last year, my favourite one is definitely Leopold Valstedt, and Valstedt's not on the list this year. I wanted him on the list again because I think he's an amazing goalkeeper, and I really do feel that I was one of the first onto him really, outside of Norway. If you're within the circle, of course you know how good he is. But I think I recognise something about him in his appearances at the back end of the 2021 season, which made me put him on this list, and I think he's gone from strength to strength. So that was my favourite one from last year, even though Fofana obviously got the big move. Yeah,
two really good picks there, and I'm sure Valstedt is probably in line for a big move soon. I think you mentioned on the Eliteserien season preview he turned down a move. So if you've not listened to that free show, do go back, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to the season preview in depth, previews of every single team and analysis. Let's move back to Austbo, Steve, though. For a lot of people watching this, he will be 18 by the time you watch it, because in a week's time from the date of this recording, which is April 24th, he is actually turning 18 on the 1st of May. So by the time you watch it, he might be a year older. But Steve, let's talk about how he first came on your radar and your thoughts on him.
Talking about age, Nino Zugelj is now a year older since we've been recording this episode, because his birthday is actually today now. So
he's serious.
I'm being serious, yeah. So
there you go.
Funny things. But on to Edvin Austbo, who
happy birthday to him in the last 10 minutes or whatever. Yeah.
I know. Austbo is, a lot of people around Viking, around Stavanger, said pre-season this is the best young talent to come out of their academy in a decade or more. And someone this young on the list is unusual for me. Very unusual. I mean, I've had players on this list in the 30s sometimes. It's not just about their age and potential. It's about a player to watch for this season. I think will do good things. But yeah, this is a player that is no doubt about it. I think can become a really great player for Viking, and probably he's out of the club within 18 months if he continues on the current trajectory. Just looks very skillful, plays both wings, can play striker. Pre-season, he was probably one of their best players, and I think they've kind of game managed him a bit at the start of this campaign. But he did start against Tromsø in match day 3, got nearly an hour out of him, and I think that might be a sign of things to come for Edvin Austbo. Sometimes at this young, you can never quite tell how good they are going to be, but I think it's quite obvious he's set for, unless, barring bad injuries and things, that he's set for a great future, because the biggest strength of this player by far is a technical ability to, and you can just tell class from a very young age sometimes.
And how do you tell class for a 17-year-old? He's not had too many appearances as Norway under-18 international. As you mentioned, they obviously talked about highly in circles in Stavanger. 8 appearances in Eliteserien, 13 in total for Viking, 3 goals, 1 assist. What is it that stands him out in terms of identifying talent, Steve?
That is a really good question. How do you tell class at any age, I suppose? It's the eye test, isn't it? I'm old-fashioned. There's so much of scouting is done with statistics now, and rightly so, don't get me wrong. But I'd like to think that the final test for clubs on recruitment, things like that, identifying talent, has got to be the eye test, hasn't it? You've got to see for yourself what these guys are doing. I'm sure there's clubs out there who just literally sign on stats and stats alone. Fair play to them. Toulouse in France are big at that. But you just, in terms of why is this player so classy, the ball sticks to his boots. Not quite Messi-esque or anything like that, but it's a very good level. You can tell he's got the technical ability. And then at the same time, when you've got decent, this is a much sort of smaller lad compared to, say, the winger we did at Bodø Glimt there, Zugelj. He's got the agility, the lower sense of balance, which enables you have players in this sort of position glide. I can see early signs of him doing that, really, and just making a mockery of fullbacks. So that is how I perceive him to be genuinely classy at this early stage of his career myself.
Yeah, and I've seen brief clips of him. He scored a cracking goal in pre-season. I think it was against Brøndby, a curled effort. He does look a little bit kind of dare I say it, Messi-esque in terms of the way he low center of gravity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anywhere near that level, but we going back to that original question of wingers. Where do you see him sort of as the best position, and where do you see him developing? Over the next year or so. You mentioned that so many people talk about him. Is he someone that you think is going to maybe get a quick big move, or do you think his development will take a little bit more time? And positionally, where is he best?
I quite like him on the left wing, cutting inside. I think that seems to be a thing these days, isn't it? You cut inside. Equally, I think he could do a job on the right wing, but it seems to be the traditional winger is less used these days, isn't it? You've got to almost be both-footed. And this guy, though, he's not just one-footed. He does have good feet, both feet, really. And you're right, what you say about his... there is almost like a Messi comparison. I hate to almost use that. It's almost impossible, isn't it? But there is something there for this lad. Burst onto the scene last summer, scored in the Conference League qualifiers, I do believe. I can't remember who it was against. Might have been Sparta Prague, or maybe the Irish team. I can't remember who it was. He came off the bench. But going back, what's another question? But yeah, best position. Yeah, for me on the left wing, cutting inside. I would say that's what I think for this for Austbo.
Yeah, and just quickly before we wrap up, where in terms of his long-term projection, where do you think he'll be there in a year's time? Do you think he's going to attract massive interest? Like you said, he's so highly rated. Do you think he needs time to develop?
Yeah, I've seen players like this move on very, very quickly sometimes because a team like, I don't know, just say a Dutch team like Feyenoord or whatever, or a Belgium side want to snap him up very, very quickly before he moves to the next level. So it wouldn't surprise me if even someone moved for him in the summer. But equally, Viking, if he's the best talent they've had come through for a decade, they'll want to get something out of him, won't they? So I think fans are kind of hoping they get another, 2 seasons out of Austbo, at least. So it's up to sometimes the player, isn't it? Are you better off, developing in your own domestic nation or taking the money early for someone else. But I reckon they'll get bids this year. It's a question of whether the player wants to move and the club wants to sell him.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Edvin Austbo, 17-year-old winger at Viking. Going to move on now. I've rejigged the order a little bit here, so I don't know if you've had a chance to see the next on the list, but it is going to be a man named Uba. Before we move on, though, he just to confirm, for anyone wondering, the goal was against Sligo Rovers, Steve.
Yeah, Sligo Rovers, that was it. Yeah, thought so.
Let's move on to Mr. Charles.
Uba Charles. Let's hope. I'm trying to think of a pun here now.
Well, we've got King Charles' coronation coming in a week's time, so
royalty. Let's hope he becomes royalty in footballing terms. Then let's hope he becomes a royalty rather than taxi for Uba Charles. Yeah.
I mean, you got it there. 20-year-old Lillestrøm midfielder. Got a great name. I'm guessing Nigerian. Yes. Let's get into Uba Charles. What makes you have him on your 10 to watch this year?
They've signed him from a club called Ljungskile, I think is how you pronounce it, in Sweden, for a reported €50,000 this March. Now, why have I put him on my list? This is almost the seal of approval was given really by the former player of Viking, not Viking, Lillestrøm, Paul Andre Helland, who is now working in their youth setup. He's also playing for a club in like the 5th tier or something as well, I think. Does a few things now, does Paul Andre Helland, but he basically, the report was he convinced Lillestrøm to sign this guy. He has described him as potentially the next John Obi Mikel. So obviously someone who, I'll be honest, I've not seen much of him at all. All you can really go on is some like preseason clips, word of mouth. I don't think he actually does have 7 minutes now of Eliteserien action under his belt, which I must have missed that. I think he's had a few jigglings of minutes in the cup as well. It's impossible really to judge him, but based on the description that Helland gave him there, based on reports, this guy is going to be a tenacious ball-winning defensive midfielder with a massive engine on him. And, they do have a history of, Akor Adams at the club, he's another Nigerian. They've got a good history of African players at Lillestrøm. And, this is someone who I would imagine will be gradually integrated into the team. They are a little bit light in midfield. So if he starts to really impress, he could knock down a starting spot. But whenever someone is described as potentially the next John Obi Mikel from a reputable source, that definitely does not escape my attention.
Yeah, and he's had minutes in Swedish football. He's played a lot. I know you said he's not played much in in Norway yet, but in terms of his minutes in Swedish football, he's played in the 3rd tier, the Etan Sodra, the southern sort of 3rd tier, 47 appearances, 2 goals. From the clips, he kind of looks like someone who can not only kind of do a job in midfield, but also get forward and break forward and join attacks, which Mikel was really good at, wasn't he, in his youth days as well, before he sort of worked under Jose Mourinho, who knocked maybe the attacking instincts out of him. Would you say that the similarities are there in that sense as well? I know you said you don't know too much about him, but from the brief little things you've seen of him.
Yeah. I think I read an interview, not with him as such, it was just some people were saying about his mentality, his personal approach to the game is the word professional has been used quite a lot, really professional. And for me, that's a really top sign, isn't it? For someone who is serious about his football, not one of these sort of, happy-go-lucky type who they can be harder, can't they, to rein in. You want professional, really. But yeah, from what I have seen of him, he does look like he's got a heck of an engine on the lad. Just one of these really great ball winners who can, you say box to box there, maybe he could become box to box. Could be something, if he does have this great engine on him. And at €50,000, it could be an unbelievable piece of business. And if it goes wrong, doesn't it? But
yeah,
this guy, I think
it's not even that much money.
No.
I've seen a goal of his against Torns in the 3rd tier where he kind of it looks like they're playing in someone's back garden. To be honest, it's some of the clubs in that division are really quite low down. But really nice goal, sort of bursting into the box, beating a couple of players, and then left-footed finish. Quite a diminutive player, maybe not as tall as Mikel, but certainly looks to sort of Kante height maybe, or someone like that. I'm trying to think of a player who can finish with their left foot about that kind of size. But yeah, certainly, like you said, maybe a gamble. And if he's so highly rated within the club and from people who are respected, sometimes you've just got to go on a bit of instinct, haven't you? So
yeah.
Do you think he's someone like we just said there? He's only just broken into the Eliteserien team, only a few minutes. Do you think he can break in, and where at Lillestrøm would he actually break into the team? Is there someone whose position maybe could be under threat if he progresses?
Yeah, I don't think they've got any really good midfielder in his position. Their best midfielder is Jerman Arsen, who is more of a playmaker. So there's definitely room in behind him. They're playing like a 3-5-2. Jerman Arsen is one of the three in the middle. It leaves two spots. At the minute, Ibrahimai and Magnus Sjoeng are the starters in that role. But Uba Charles may literally be the next cab off the rank, pun intended. So it's up to him. But I don't think he's going to just immediately become a starter lockdown immediately. It's one of those, maybe an injury comes in and he makes his mark, or if you're good enough, you just force your way into the team, don't you? And I think that's got to be his objective by the end of the year, by the end of the season. Becoming a more, if not a regular starter, then getting more starts, more minutes off the bench. Definitely want to keep an eye on for sure. I think Uba Charles could be a really great player for Lillestrøm.
There you go. That's Uba Charles in Wakoma. That's his full Nigerian name as well, by the way, just from a quick Google search. But keep an eye out for him. He could be one that breaks through, and maybe in a year's time, everyone will be talking about him, which is kind of the aim of this 10 to watch. Onto your fifth choice. Well, not fifth choice, but number 5 on your list, Steve. Getting to the halfway point now. And we've got a player at HamKam. Back to forwards. Charles, you've mentioned as a central midfield player. We're going to go to forwards now. I know you like your goalkeepers. There is one on the list. But let's take a look at your HamKam player.
Yeah, oldest player on the list. Henrik Udahl, striker at HamKam. There's actually another player at HamKam I nearly included on this list. They've got a midfielder called Benjamin Torsten Faras, who is a young talent, but it might just be a bit too early for him. And I've got to be honest, Henrik Udahl would not have been on my 10 to watch list if we'd done this before the start of the season, before a ball was kicked. But what he's shown me in the first 3 games is something, which is, I've seen players in especially strikers in Norway, who I'm not saying he's been written off, but I've seen players before who everyone's saying they're kind of finished. You're not expecting much from. Turge Berven was an example. Mushaka Bakenga. I've seen others who suddenly around this sort of age, even older, just randomly have an unbelievable season of scoring, and they become this really good striker. And I think that might happen with Udahl. I really do. They've signed him from Vålerenga this winter, and he looks like the perfect fit for HamKam. He wasn't given enough minutes at Vålerenga. He was just used as a super sub by Fagermo. But whenever he did start there, he never did a lot wrong, really. It's just the manager preferred a different striker at that club. But the last time he had a full season under his belt was in Obos-Liga in 2020. He scored 19 league goals in 29 starts for a team called Åsen in the second tier. So I think he's a natural goal scorer. He's a fox in the box. He's already scored 3 goals in 3 games this season. He is, I actually said in the season preview, I don't see who's going to score the goals for HamKam. Well, actually, this guy may very well prove me wrong, because he for their system, he looks a perfect fit. And I've seen these type of players just suddenly randomly grow not out of nowhere, but just break through in a different change of environment with different coaching and a different system. And Henrik Udahl could maybe break through into like a 15-goal striker this season.
He's really sort of burst onto the scene, like you said, in the early part of this season, hasn't he? So we'll see if he can kind of maintain that form. But looking at some of the goals, I mean, he bagged a brace against who was it? I think Sandefjord, scored against Godset. I know one was a penalty against Sandefjord, but still, what attributes do you think can maybe make him a bit of a late bloomer? I mean, he's born in '97, so it's not as if he's an old duck. But like you said, maybe those strikers who break through a little bit later in their careers, what do you think he can offer from that point of view? Is he a target man? Is he Is he a kind of, you mentioned a fox in the box, is he kind of a bit of everything, or does he fit a certain style? Do you know what I mean? Just tell us a little bit about his evolution and where he can go from here, that makes you want to put him in the 10 to watch.
He reminds me an awful lot of a player that you might remember. Not many watching this show will probably know him. It was a French player called Steve Wyss, who ended up, I think, at 27 years old, just suddenly burst onto the scene and scored tons of goals for Valenciennes at Ligue 1 level. And I think sometimes these players have got a chip on their back. They've got a point to prove. I think he's had 2 years at Vålerenga where he's not really, he will probably feel he's not been given a fair crack of the whip. You're really determined to succeed. At that age, you are a lot more mature, mentally, positionally, everything about life, physically as well, perhaps, in terms of looking after your body. And I think this guy's at this age, but his best qualities for me, I think, fox in the box. He knows where to position himself in the penalty area to be on the end of, chances, mopping up or getting on the end of a cross. And yeah, he looks like he's got a good finish on him, to be honest. I think that's kind of lost in, everyone's forgetting that at Vålerenga over the last couple of years, but he just simply wasn't given enough game time to show it. Got nothing wrong with his finishing. And you mentioned one of the goals of the season as a penalty already. I like that. I like that he's got the determination, confidence to step up and on his debut for the club and put the penalty away. So I think really, really strong mental player who is just like a dog with a bone. You just can't get it off him. He won't give up. Relentless.
Yeah, maybe a late bloomer as well, which is always good to see, isn't it? I mean, he's probably the oldest player that will be on this, maybe on both. 10 to watches. He's definitely the oldest on your list. 51 games in the Eliteserien, 13 goals. But as Steve's mentioned there, maybe a late bloomer. And if you look at actually some of his goals, he can do all different types of finishes, can't he? He can score in the box. I've seen one where he lobs it over the keeper. Like you said, they're penalties as well. So those sort of players who can score different types of goals, especially when they get a good run in the team, sometimes it's just having that opportunity, isn't it, Steve, to be the main man of a team that kind of propels you. So in total in his career, 152 games, 59 goals, 12 assists according to Transfermarkt. So yeah, maybe this could be one that is a bit of a outside bet there. So keep an eye on him. Henrik Udahl, 26-year-old at Ham Cam. That takes us to past the midway point of this show. We've got a few left. We're going to move to Salzburg now, Steve. You've got a very eclectic mix here of clubs, no more than one player from every club. So, you've got a very eclectic brand here of choices. You've definitely been doing your research. And the next one is another winger, in fact. He is Christopher Bonsu-Baah at Salzburg.
Yeah. And 18-year-old winger who already, I think people are talking about him. I think I saw a scout report on him on one of the YouTube channels recently. But this guy was on my radar as soon as he came to the club from pre-season, immediately made some eye-catching performances. He's got great physical acceleration, bursts. I think that's his big strength at the moment. He's typical sort of raw winger, if you know what I mean, Jonathan. Often a bit all pace and sometimes not a lot else. But I think he's got more composure about him than quite a lot of players do have at this age. Ghanaian. They've signed him from a club called Shooting Stars. Great name. Isn't that one? Late March, actually. So he's not actually even been at the club that long. But I don't know where on earth they some clubs up in Scandinavia are brilliant at this, aren't they? Scouting Africa. And I would do the same. There's some unbelievable talent down there, as you rightly know. And, I don't know maybe I'll call him the next Andre Ayew or Jordan Ayew. I don't know whether that's fair or not, but there's no doubt about it. From what I've seen of him so far, he could terrorize Eliteserien for the next year or two. And then it all depends how he develops sort of mentally and technically. But at the moment, unbelievable physicals.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading an article about his background and life story. His fascinating life story. Apparently, when he was given a contract at Salzburg, I think it's a 3-year deal, maybe, or multiple-year deal, he was so proud, he says in an interview, that he slept in his kit on his first night of getting the contract. So he slept in the full kit. He said he was so proud. And someone that also, I think someone in Norway described it as the best trial he'd ever seen. So could be a bit of a hidden gem here. Just reading a few other bits from the interview, he says that two biggest things that surprised him about Norway were the prices in the shops and the snow. So obviously a very cultural, happens to obviously a lot of African players having to adapt culturally to Norway, which, and the different climate. We talk about wingers, and, we've discussed technical wingers who can cut inside, ones who can go on the outside. You've got a few on your list here, Steve. What kind of profile of winger do you think Baah is from that point of view? And how do you expect him to be used by Salzburg?
He's a left footer playing on the right hand side at the moment. So sort of Mo Salah sort of thing. Not quite of the same profile as Salah, but that's how at the moment he seems like one of these that will cut inside. I watched quite a bit of him in the game against Odd recently. He got the full 90 minutes. I mean, it's quite telling, isn't it? The first game, he started all 3 games as an 18-year-old, only just at the club less than a month. 61 minutes in the first game, 83 in the second, and a full 90 in the third. I quite liked how he was willing to hold the ball up and wait for the right pass if needed. So that shows already there's a bit more composure there about him. I think he's got a bit of work to do on some of his crossing at the moment, perhaps, and decision-making. There were times I actually thought he could have maybe shot, but he opted not to, which is interesting. Often you're a bit greedy, aren't you, at that age, but or blinkered. So I think he needs to maybe work on his decision-making, his technical finishing. And I think we're waiting. He hasn't actually faced a really poor team yet, or a really poor defence. And I think there could be all hell let loose when he does. If you're against a left back or a left-sided centre back who struggles against that sort of player, then it could be absolute havoc. But he's still quite raw. Left foot, a strong left foot. Not really much of a right foot at this point in time that I've seen. That could develop though. So at the moment, that's the position sort of area he's looking at. Obviously, you could maybe look at the other side as well in time.
Yeah, and according to one media report, not know how accurate it is, but there are pictures of him in the kit at Barcelona. So apparently he had a trials at Barcelona, Borussia Dortmund, and Manchester United as well. I didn't make it, but maybe this can be the launchpad for his career. So Christopher Bonsu-Baah, 18 years old winger from Salzburg. Keep an eye. Him clearly seems like a talent to watch and an interesting backstory there as well. Steve, we're going to move on to your 7th choice, Magnus Sjoeng. Finally got a goalkeeper here.
There wasn't going to be a goalkeeper on my list this season because not that. I mean, by the way, this is an unbelievable year for goalkeepers in Eliteserien. I think there's some fantastic talents, but most of them have already been on the 10 to watch list before, or they're over 30. Which
you do love a goalkeeper. Maybe you've exhausted them all.
I think I have. You've got the likes of Wallstedt, Christensen. I like the lad at Tromsø, Hårgaard, Sandberg, Isak Pettersson. I nearly included him. That would almost be cheating, wouldn't it? He was our Svensson goalkeeper of the season, for crying out loud. He's not.
We'd have had to check VAR for that one.
Yeah, we would. So, in the end, I've opted for Magnus Sjoeng. It's another pronunciation I struggle with. When J's are involved, Jonathan, I do struggle with them. But he's the goalkeeper, the starting keeper for Vålerenga. They do have a good history of goalkeepers in recent years, of course. Christopher Clausen to Leeds. The lad who went to Toulouse, who I've forgotten his name, which I can't believe I have, and I will get you that name in a minute. But Sjoeng is the next cab off the rank for them. 21-year-old goalkeeper for them. Started quite a few games back end of last season. And he's the starter at the beginning of this campaign as well. And I think he's the best young, raw, talented keeper in Eliteserien right now. For his age, obviously there's some great talents as well that are developing. But I had to get a goalkeeper on the list. He kind of was the only real logical one I could put on. So he gets on.
Simple as that. And, what would you say is his number one best attribute in terms of developing as a keeper? You're someone who really, I think if we had to pick one position for you to scout, if you were at Brighton, for example, where they scout by position, you definitely apply for the Brighton goalkeeping scout job. If you had one super strength, whether it's shot stopping, handling, kicking, rushing off his line, whatever, what would you say is his current super strength? And what maybe does he need to work on? Sorry.
I think what has caught my eye with him is his is his shot stopping reflexes. We had 2 goalkeepers on the 10 to watch list last year, Christensen and Wallstedt, and Wallstedt was the one with the better reflex saves. Christensen is better at command of area, things like that, probably distribution. Overall, I think Sjoeng's more of a Wallstedt in that respect. I don't think he's as good, but I've seen him make some really good saves, so he's getting into some good positions in that respect. Not sure sometimes about his. At times, he reminds me a little bit of Ilan Meslier at Leeds. Actually, some of his how he deals with crosses in good and bad ways. Distribution's okay. At the moment, he's more in a system where it's a long ball system rather than short, so he's hard to judge in that respect. At times, a little bit of frantic nature about him, which concerns me a little bit. But he is only 21, and crucially, for his age, he has saved moments for Vålerenga which have looked like goals. And for me, that is the first port of call with any goalkeeper: prevent goals which are expected to go in the back of the net.
And he's a regular, is he? Is he going to be a regular in the team this season, do you think?
Yeah, and the good thing is they've got a backup called Jacob Storovic, who, 2 or 3 years ago, he was doing great stuff for Sandefjord. So this is a 27-year-old backup who will push him. So if he goes off form, which might happen, then, he might even lose his spot in the team, which isn't the worst thing, actually. He can make you a bit more motivated, can't it, to come back. So I think that's a really good goalkeeping unit they've got, actually, at Vålerenga. They've got a great history of goalkeepers in recent years, and they've actually signed another young lad in the off-season called Magnus Sjoeng Jensen, who might be on the 10 to watch list in 3 years' time or something. So it's an unbelievable goalkeeping breeding ground for some reason. Is Vålerenga. Like, some of the best young keepers have come up from their system, but they've moved. The ones that have moved on so far haven't really done much, unfortunately, abroad yet. So
So they're good at growing them, maybe not so good at exporting them.
Well, they're getting rid of them, but then the players that move from there hardly get a minute anywhere.
Maybe they miss on.
But Magnus Sjoeng, I think, could be a good year for him. Let's see how he develops. I'm less sure about him than I was with some of these other goalkeeping talents. I'm not going to lie. I don't see him as good as Christensen, Wallstedt. I don't see him as good as Klaassen was, to be honest. But we had to get a goalkeeper on the list. He was the only real one that could fit the bill. And I think he's decent. He could surprise and go a decent distance.
Totally fair enough. You've managed to get a goalkeeper onto the list. Congratulations to Magnus Sjoeng. Let's see how he gets on. Next on your list, we're going to Molde. Obviously, the champions. We've made the champions wait a little bit to feature on this list with a player, but he's more of a defensive player, I think, or a wing back. You don't have too many defenders on your list. Very attacking lineup here. Bielsa, Moan, maybe. You take it away.
Yeah.
Give us the name.
I don't have a centre back on my list, probably for the first time ever on these 10 to watch lists. Mathias Fjortoft Lovik, wing back at Molde. I wanted to get a Molde player involved, and there's a few that I looked at. I just think I like what I saw from him back end of last year. He was given some starts when they were rotating between Europe and domestic. Looked quite good. Obviously, they're playing a 3-5-2 system or 3-4-3 system. So he's a wing back at the moment. We don't know if he can play anywhere else. I imagine he probably could play left back pretty well. Probably left midfield. Is that even a position these days? At the moment he hasn't actually started a game this season, but he has had some minutes off the bench. I think he will get some more minutes as the year progresses and involved in lots of different competitions. Looks like just a good, balanced young player, to be honest. Jonathan, you're going to ask me what his best attributes are, probably if he's better offensively or defensively. But I think there's a really good balance. Probably lean a little bit more towards his marauding forward runs. So it's a player that is obviously at a club where there's a massive depth. They're expected to title challenge. At the moment they've had a bad start, but I don't know whether that helps him or not. But the best thing about this sort of player in their development is they're not rushed into it sometimes. And I know some have the ideology of, sink or swim, put them in the deep end, see how they do. It's not always the best way, is it? drip feed these players into teams and they can develop really well. And I think he'll be an example of that.
Mathias Fjortoft Lovik. He's not played a huge amount of games for Molde, has he? I don't think at the moment. He's still quite young. 16 in total. In Eliteserien, that is, of course, but 3 assists, which is a decent return for 884 minutes.
Yeah.
Clearly someone maybe, he's played Conference League as well, qualifiers. Positionally, is he very left-sided, or is he someone that can play on either side? Or what's your sort of thoughts on you've put wing back here, so I'm getting an impression he's not great defensively, or is that mistaken?
I mean, I quite like his balance, but I think if I had to lean to what he's best at is going forward. I like his marauding runs forward. He's had some assists. He's a left footer. I don't think he's going to become the next inverted wing back in Pep's system somehow.
Does it mean though that, for example, he can't play in a 4-4-2 system, for example, a 4-3-3 system? Does he have to play in a 3-5-2 sort of with the wing backs? Very sort of maybe Tottenham-esque. How they push their wing backs.
Well, that's the danger, isn't it? If you're not careful, then you can end up in such a Pacific system. But this system is used a lot around the world now. Frank Ice's Lons is very similar to what Molde employ. He would fit in that system like a glove there. Does it mean he couldn't play? I mean, we don't know, do we? Could he play left back? I would be a little bit more concerned if he's in a back four. Yeah, of course I would, because he's got to do a lot more one-on-one defending. And we've not really seen him do that a lot on Molde because they're more on the front foot dominating games. So that's where the question marks are. Is he good enough defending that way? He looks like he can recover really well from what I've seen of him so far. But yeah, when you are in the wing-back role, obviously it does showcase your attacking abilities a bit more. I think he's got something about him. Now, he might be a player that eventually, I think he's either going to become like the starting player for Molde in this position, or he'll end up probably moving to another Eliteserien club. Not as good as Molde. We don't quite know yet, but his future at the club will be very much at Molde in the next 2 or 3 years, no doubt about that. I don't see him someone suddenly exported abroad. He doesn't signal to me like he's amazing or anything like that age. But I think he could become a very, really solid player for them at this level of football. And it's a position which I think takes longer to develop in age. I really do think you need more maturity in age to master this position. And that only comes in time.
Well, he's got plenty of time on his side. Not a young, tender age of 19. Mathias Fjortoft and Lovik, keep an eye on him. At Molde, who, they've sold a few good players in the years, haven't they? Look at Erling Haaland as one. But let's move on. You've got two more left before we round off this 10 to watch Eliteserien 2023. Don't forget to give us any feedback in the comments on Patreon. Or, of course, you can tweet us at Nordic Footpod, Steve at Meatman Soccer, or me at JFFUTBOL. Number 9 on your list, Steve, we're going to Sandefjord. And this time it is a traditional fullback, I guess, in the sense that you've described him as a fullback. So take it away for your penultimate pick.
I've actually got him listed as wingback on here because...
he's written as fullback on you.
Have I written him as fullback? I think he can play. He's been playing fullback, but this is a really interesting player. I think of all the players on the list, there's an X factor here. There's like, it could become nothing, but they could be an amazing player at the end of the journey because footballing blood runs in this family. He's actually got a brother called Sindre Walle Egeli, who is only 16 years old. And he's already been nicked out of this league from Sandefjord by Norgeland in Denmark, a club famed for basically signing young players. And it's a factory, isn't it? No, I think I remember on talking to Henry about this club before, Norgeland. And so they're brilliant at talent ID. So they've got his brother already. But this lad seems pretty good to me as well. Vetle Walle Egeli, who can play at the moment when he has been playing. It's been in, at left back for Sandefjord, but it seems like he can play any fullback role, left or right hand side. Probably can play wing back positions as well. He's played quite a few games for the Norwegian under 19, 18 setup. From what I've seen, he's always been in those squads, getting minutes. And that's always a great sign, in my opinion. It's someone that's highly rated. He's at the minute a regular starter for Sandefjord at this age is absolutely fantastic. In fact, already this season, he's actually played at right back and left back as a starter. So I've seen a bit of him. He looks, I don't want to say genuinely two-footed, but he looks like he can hold his own with either foot. And there's something about this. You see, don't you, footballers in the same family, you can just explode and be really good. So I had to include him in this 10 to watch list because the ceiling might be really high.
Yeah, and it seems like he's got a decent cross on him. I mean, if you're looking at wing backs in that sense, I know John Arne Riise sort of comes to mind, doesn't he? With Liverpool for many years. He seems to get up and down as well for the youth teams of his youth team at international level. What do you think? Sandefjord, a club who don't tend to be renowned for developing young players, I don't think. Can he break into the team? Has he already broken into the team? And where do you see him in a year's time, for example? What's he need to work on to really establish himself? Where would you rank him at the moment in terms of wing backs or full backs in Eliteserien? And where do you think he can get to in the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's a good question about, well, not even a question, but a statement about Sandefjord. They're not known for developing their own players. I don't actually know the history here, but I suspect it's just a case of a family that lives close to Sandefjord that they've picked up. It can happen, right? That's football. And at the moment, I saw a bit of him back end of last season. He got a few minutes. I've seen him in pre-season, NM Cup, and the start of Eliteserien. He's not if he wants to develop, he's not really at the right club, unfortunately. No disrespect to Sandefjord. They've not got the facilities, really. The coaching setup, they've not really got the pitch itself is horrendous there as well. So if you want to be improving your technical play, Sandefjord's not really the place for it. But what it can do, playing as a regular starter in the Eliteserien at senior level, it can toughen you up. And that will do him some good. Mentally, it's not the worst place to be, say, for a whole season. And we know his brother's been picked up by a top Danish team. Already there'll be that's obviously they've got good links to family perhaps there. So it may well be a case of if he does leave Sandefjord, if and when, then it will be outside of Norway. So, yeah, he's in a nice position, really. He's 18-year-old and he's a regular starter for a team which is fairly poor in terms of the squad setup. So he will stand out as a good talent. And, there's sometimes not as much pressure is there when you're at a club like that. So maybe for the next 12 months, he's in a good spot, but then he might have to think about his career.
Yeah, seems like someone who, if you're playing regular minutes at that level, as an 18-year-old at a relatively sort of smaller club in that kind of league, you imagine he's either going to get picked up by one of the big clubs, isn't he, in Scandinavia? Maybe a Molde or a Rosenborg might be looking at him, and maybe even a Glimt. If not, maybe moving abroad, like you said there, as his brother has done. 21 appearances for Sandefjord, 1 goal, 1 assist, predominantly as a left back, as you've said. He's also played D mid a few times. And he's a Norwegian under-19 international, Vetle, Walle, Egeli. So, yeah, that's definitely one to keep an eye on at Sandefjord, and I'm sure Sandefjord fans will enjoy watching his development as well, because, as you mentioned, maybe not renowned for youth development at that club. Your final pick, Steve, 10 to watch for 2023. Let's wrap it up. We're moving to Stabæk now. Recently had their assistant manager on the podcast, and you're going to round it off with one of their players.
Yeah, another player here with a Danish connection. He is Danish. He's coming from Aalborg this winter. As soon as I saw him for the first time, Kasper Hogh, or Hogh, I think is the pronunciation, then I knew he's going to be a handful because he's a really big sort of physical target man striker. Just if I was defending against that sort of person, I would hate it, I think. So he just caught my eye because of his age as well, because he's not just got that, he's got a good finish on him. Like this, you occasionally get big lads, don't you, who have got that technique on them.
Good touch for a big man.
Good touch for a big man. I mean, Kanu was a great example, wasn't he, at Arsenal? He was more streaky in that respect, wasn't he? But it can happen. And I just think he's been around a few clubs. He hasn't really settled anywhere enough. But there's definitely goals in this lad. If you look at his history in like certainly youth level and things like that, I think he's a matchup nightmare for defenders. he should have. I think he's finally scored a goal this season for them, round 3. But he definitely has had other chances. He can use his physical abilities to get him goals and his technical abilities to get him goals. So he's a sort of striker who I think could have a really big breakthrough year. Around maybe 15 goals, a dozen goals plus. And then you're ready for your next move in your career, aren't you? Either somewhere else in Norway or even outside of the country. Just looks like a really good pickup. As soon as I saw him, I'm like, yeah, they've done really well. They've actually done really well with recruitment this winter, Stabæk. They're under the radar, and he's going to be an absolute handful, and he's still very, very young.
Yeah, you mentioned there he sort of signed from his transfer history. He's actually Danish, isn't he? And he was signed from he's on loan, right, from Aalborg, formerly of Randers as well. He's played in Valur, so he's been around the block actually for a young talent, as you've mentioned there. Only 2022, so it's not not too young, but I'm guessing, as you've mentioned there, in terms of his size, he's an out-and-out target man, is he? Or can he play off the shoulder, for example? Does he have mobility?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen on my spreadsheet here on loan from Aalborg, and I wasn't sure if there is an optional fee. Now, I hope for Stabæk's case there is. Otherwise, if he is, then he might be the next Gift Orban for them, where they sign him and then sell him immediately. If not, then Aalborg can cash in. I don't even know what his contractual situation is, but yeah, what type of
his contract? Just to answer that for you, he's got a contract at Aalborg till 2026, so that implies that they must like him a little bit to have dished out a 3-year contract. But you still never know. There may be an option. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was a great signing for this season for sure.
But player wise, you're about to say what type of player?
Yeah, what type of player? I think. I think he's more physical rather than technical slightly. You can really get the ball up to him, and he's going to win most of the balls, by Peter Crouch-esque in that respect. That's who he reminds me of, actually, Peter Crouch, who did have a decent touch on him, didn't he, as well, Crouchy, to be fair. But yeah, I think that's the sort of striker we're dealing with here. There's not too many of them these days. Andy Carroll, sort of in his pomp, is maybe a good comparison as well. I almost feel like they're a bit old-fashioned, or these days they're literally all muscle and nothing else. This guy's got more technique on him than your average Joe, and I think he's, like I say, unfortunately, it looks like he's not going to settle at a club again long term, is it? But there's definitely a player in this guy, no doubt about it. Kasper Hogh.
Fantastic. That pretty much wraps it up. That's your 10. Yeah. Do you want to just read through the list yourself and before we wrap up the show?
I've actually completely forgotten which order we've done it in. So
any order you like.
But on the list I've got it here on my buttons here, we'll go through them actually. So we start with Nino Zugelj from Buda Glimt, 23-year-old. Kristall Ingason from Rosenborg, striker. Edvin Austbo from Viking. Magnus Sjoeng, goalkeeper Vålerenga. Uba Charles from Lillestrøm, centre midfielder. Christopher Bonsu-Baah, the wonderfully named Christopher Bonsu-Baah from Sarpsborg, winger. Kasper Hogh, who we just talked about, Stabæk striker. Mathias Fjortoft, Lovik, wingback from Molde. Vetle, Walle, Egeli, wingback from Sandefjord. And Henrik Udahl from HamKam, striker. And I don't have an 11th man this year, do I? Not got a bonus. I've not got a bonus this year. I can't.
No bonuses. We don't need
no bonuses this year.
Listen to the show. Obviously, we've already talked about it, haven't we? That we will try and bring you more player analyses during the season. So keep an eye on the Patreon for that. Of course, if you're a subscriber on different tiers, we really appreciate your support. That's your 10 to watch. Keep an eye on all of them. Let's see where they are in a year's time. Will there be another sort of multi-million-pound move to Chelsea for one of these 10? You never know. We've got the track record. So well done to you, Steve. We'll keep an eye on all those players. And as we've mentioned, you can tweet us. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, Nordic Football Podcast YouTube. You could also obviously find us on the main show on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. Just type in Nordic Football Podcast to listen to the weekly shows. So that will do for this year's 10 to watch Eliteserien. We will keep an eye on these players just as we do every year. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for hosting. And we wish all these players the very best. We know some are destined for the top. So, yeah, take it from there. Thanks very much for watching. Appreciate your support. See you around very soon. Goodbye.
And don't forget the Allsvenskan 2023 season. Allsvenskan players to watch as well coming soon. So, yeah, don't forget to top up your Scouts notebook with that one as well. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.